Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Daily Detroit, sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. I am Jer Stays. Today, we're going to be talking all about sports, and to do that, none other than Fletcher Sharpe. How are you?
I'm good. There was a nice sports weekend in the city. Most of the teams won, if not all of them, and people are very much happier when that happens.
For sure. I mean, across the board, whether you've got the Tigers, the Lions, Michigan, DCFC pulled off a win. So wins all around. But I think today we're going to talk about the Tigers because this is an epic run that's happening right now. The Lions and, maybe a little bit more. So first, this Tigers run, I think, is very improbable. And I want to break this down a bit because we were pretty despondent, maybe a month and a half ago about this season. Not even sure if we were going to hit 500, let alone, as we are recording this, in a wild card playoff spot with, frankly, it's all in our hands. Games that we need to win, games that we should win. We're ending out the season against the Chicago White Sox. What's different? What's changed? What are three things, Fletcher Sharpe, that have changed?
So this first one isn't necessarily a change, but something that's kind of fortified itself. Tarek Skubal has been playing great all season, but he's really pulled away from some other pitchers and even most of the pitching staff. He's second in wins and losses, second in ERA, second in strikeouts, second in whip. When he's up there, it's kind of like the old Verlander / Scherzer feeling where this is a win. If they just give him 3 or 4 runs, the Tigers win this game. And to have a feeling like that with a pitcher finally after so long, just being well, they'll figure it out, has been such a relief. And even to a degree, I'm not going to say that he's fortified other pitchers, but I have noticed Kenti Maeda, who's been terrible with ERA the past few years, but especially terrible this year, he's even showed up a few things in terms of helping the team win. So pitching overall has been better, which I mean, it's hard to do. Again, Tarek Skubal's been playing great, lights out great, but I feel like all the other pitchers kind of picked up their stuff as well. Secondly, hitting wise, the averages aren't that much better, but they're making plays that they need to make now. Whereas before it'd be might go 2 for 5 or 1 for 4, but that one hit comes in the 3rd inning. Whereas now that one hit might come in the 8th when when there's people on base, maybe 1 or 2 outs, you come in and bring in a back-breaking run to kind of extend the lead or, tie the game up type of thing. The plays are way more clutch than they were earlier in the season, which you still want to see higher than, 220 batting average, 230 batting average. But if the hits are coming at the right times, it doesn't really matter at that point. You just got to keep grinding it out to get a win. And again, the city loves grinders. Red Wings hockey, Lions playing well, Bad Boys Pistons, the going to work Pistons. The theme is we got to go in there and keep grinding this dust till we get a diamond. So obviously, this type of play style is going to resonate very much with the Detroit Tigers fans, whether they win or lose, but especially if they win. And my third reason, I'm being so serious. I know people are going to laugh, but I'm being deathly serious. And if people could see my face, they would know how serious I'm being. Since August 22nd, there's been one name missing from the lineup for the team and for the fans. And I've noticed they've been playing a lot better since that series against the Cubs. And that is Javier Baez. When you don't have a 184 batting average bringing you down for most of the season, you start to play a little bit better. When you're not seeing someone come up and go, oh man, that's definitely a strikeout. Someone who's swinging at the knees for a pitch that's somewhere in the chest, that's definitely going to help your team play better because it's such a backbreaker to go make some runs and get close to a game and have your big multi-million-dollar man go up there and strike out with such force that everyone back home gasps. I think him not being in there, whether it's play, whether it's a little injury here or there, has really helped the team gel a bit more. And really helped instill, I'm sure, again, he's on the Tigers. I'm sure he's happy that they're winning. I'm sure he wants the team to win. I'm not sitting here saying that he's purposely trying to bring the team down or something. But seeing someone else in that position play well or even play at the average is definitely helping the team's morale in that degree.
I remember us talking a little bit about this, that he should sit. And it's a huge contract to eat. But I think we were right. He just doesn't fit. And I know the math sucks and that losing the money sucks, but I don't know. If I'm him, I'm sitting there going, this is my last check. I don't know where else I'm going to go after this. Because unless there's a huge rehab, which I feel like he's had every chance to do, I don't think he needs to be a part of this team. I think you just need to eat it and move on.
No, and that's the part that stinks the most.
I mean, does it stink? I mean, we now know.
It stinks because when you brought him in from the Mets, he was batting almost 300, and you're like, all right, it was in a lessened amount of games, but he was still batting well. With the Cubs, his average was up and down, but he was always reliable fielding. He was always a pretty good, reliable fielder, Golden Glove winning type fielder. And while he's able to make those plays, potentially still, he also is prone to making some errors, like, the time where he got an out and walked off, threw the ball into the stands thinking it was a third out and it was a second out. The time he loafed after a ball and they had to pull him out of the game because you can't be doing that worth that much money. Honestly, in a way, he reminds me of another former Tigers player. I said it off air, but kind of like Brandon Inge. The difference with Brandon Inge is while everything in my fiber hated Brandon Inge at third base so much, because after he had that 1 year where he was in the home run hitting derby where he thought he was like the best hitter ever, and then he ended up becoming like one of the worst swingers I've ever seen of the bat in my life. At least Brandon Inge made it okay for him to play at third because he didn't make mistakes. Was he going to throw you out on a tight call at first? Probably not. Didn't really have the equipment for that, but he was not going to make an error there. He was more likely to strike out 4 times than he is to make a really stupid error. So he was able to keep his position there, number one, because of that, number two, because they didn't have anyone else who could kind of displace him. They ended up being able to move Miguel Cabrera to third for a moment before it was like, yeah, we can't do that. Put him back to first. At least Inge was able to do something. Javier Baez is a great fielder for sure, but when he's not fielding well, like he's literally a super net negative. It stinks because when he came in, you're like, okay, this guy has played well, played for some pretty big teams, played well for some big teams, played well in the postseason, has all these accolades. He's going to come here and he's going to do something. Like, we know he strikes out a lot, but also when he makes contact with this young team, it can revitalize him. And then he came in and batted 238, 222, and currently at 184. And it's like, yeah, man, this is not going to get it done. A winning team cannot have one of their stars, because he's a star for the team, whether he wants to be or not, cannot have their stars batting at this level. It is not acceptable. And it just stinks because now you have to, instead of trying to figure out a way to let this player play out his contract and figure it out and go from there. Like when Miggy near the end of his career at the Tigers, he was not very good, but like people were like, we're not going to trade him. We're not going to get rid of him because he's done so much for this franchise, and we're going to let him go up there and then whiff at balls if he needs to because he's Miguel Cabrera and we love him. Now you're like, how do we get rid of this big contract? Do we cut him? Do we eat all this money? Do we try to trade him to something? Like, you're trying to figure out how to maneuver this money around to get rid of this person that you worked so hard to bring in. And that's always painful and sad because he's a multi-millionaire, but they're also people too. And like, you form attachments to places. And I'm sure there are people here that, he wouldn't necessarily want to see gone. And I'm sure it doesn't really help you feel good to know a team is playing better without you. You start sitting, the team goes on like a really great win streak that doesn't really probably do great for your confidence, which when you get back in means you're probably going to start playing a little bit worse.
I mean, send him to the White Sox as far as I care. I don't have that attachment at all because I want to see a team that wins, and I'm tired of, this is the first time in many years that we can even have a playoff discussion. And that leads me to my thoughts about this next 2 series. These final 2 series are really important. You've got the Rays and the White Sox. The Rays are a very beatable team. The White Sox are definitely a beatable team. I think that Detroit's future is in our hands at this point. And so what are we thinking about as far as percentage of getting into the wild card slot? I'm going to be optimistic, Fletcher Sharpe. I feel like we have a 60% chance of getting into the playoffs. Looking at our schedule, I wouldn't feel that way if our last 3 games weren't the White Sox.
I'll say this. I might even one-up you here.
Really? You are usually grumpy cat about this.
If they take 2 games from the Rays, they're in the playoffs. There's no way I see the White Sox beating the Tigers even once in that last series. If they take 2 games from the Rays in this up next series, they're in the wild card spot in the playoffs.
Because you think they'll bring it home with the White Sox?
Oh, for sure. If you look at that point where it's like, hey, the only thing between us is this very thin styrofoam wall and pay dirt, I'm going to bust through that wall with all the force I have. If they can take 2 games from the Rays and kind of keep the distance they have between themselves and the Twins, I think they're good. Obviously, you don't want to overlook because while the White Sox have a horrendous record, they are all major league players who are not at this point playing for next year's contracts for people who've been called up. part-time players are playing to try to make sure they still have a team for next year. So obviously they have something to play for. They're not just playing for nothing, but like you're playing to go to the playoffs for the first time in some time, and you're playing at home with all of the fans. Like I'm sure Comerica will be packed. I know I'll be there for that last series.
I am jealous of you because if any listeners happen to have a couple of tickets, I really would love to go to that last series. It would be amazing to be a part of that, especially because I honestly hadn't had a chance to get out to a game all year with how crazy things have been around work. I haven't had a chance to see anything, so except on TV or on the radio. So, yeah, that's going to be an amazing atmosphere at Comerica Park.
Yeah, I definitely lucked out. My father was like, do you want to go to a Tigers game? And I was like, yeah, sure, whenever. And he's like, all right, I got one of the ones against the White Sox. And we're like, cool. And then they won their games. And he's like, oh, those games are going to be pretty hectic, huh? And I was like, yeah, you lucked out, man. Like, you really lucked out because you definitely won't be able to buy those now.
Can Mr. Sharpe be mighty too?
I mean, you got to deal with the trauma I had to deal with growing up. So, yeah, sure, maybe. I think the Tigers definitely have a shot. Like, if they can take even one game from the Rays, I would feel better with two to be more definite. If they can take 2 games from the Rays, they're going to they're going to sweep the White Sox. They're going to be in the postseason. And honestly, that would be good for this city. It'd be good to see a remontada of sorts with the Tigers and the Lions happening at the same time.
Well, if you've got thoughts on the Tigers, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Would love to hear them. Let's change gears. Let's talk about the Lions. They pulled off the win against the Arizona Cardinals. I was all about that hook and ladder play. I had some fun watching this game, although I feel like the Lions kept the Cardinals in it longer than it needed to be. But we always have to remember, the NFL is a league with a lot of parity, and it's pretty rare that you're going to see some sort of blowout in the NFL nowadays.
Unless you're the Dallas Cowboys, then like that's just a weekly thing. If there's one thing that I don't like about Aaron Glenn, it's the only thing I don't like about Aaron Glenn, is that he's very rigid in the way that he goes about his business, which is good. It's how you get places. But Kyler Murray, for the first half, was giving the Lions fits because he's a mobile quarterback. And typically in today's day and age of NFL football, when you have a mobile quarterback, you run something called a quarterback spy, where one of your linebackers or maybe your strong safety focus in on that quarterback. They sit there and they're like, okay, wherever he goes, I go. If he goes left, I go left. If he goes right, I go right. He goes to the bathroom, I'm outside waiting for him to come outside. But Aaron Glenn is like, I don't do quarterback spies. I don't do that. And you do a quarterback spy because it makes sure if they want to take off the run, someone is there to hit them immediately. It was popularized with Michael Vick. Back when Michael Vick was being the human highlight reel, they had to find a way to stop him. So it's like, we take one of our linebackers out of coverage, we're going to put them right there. So when he takes off to run, you hit him immediately. You do not let him get 15 yards down the field running at full speed, because at that point, he's now super dangerous. With Michael Vick, he was so fast it didn't matter. Kyler Murray is not Michael Vick. But point being is, against mobile quarterbacks, especially last year, and it's kind of starting to rear its head this year, if you don't put a spy on them, they will take off. They will make plays with their legs. Last week we saw with Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield did not have the best game passing last week, but he had some back-breaking runs against the Lions because they didn't have a spy, and he was able to get 4 or 5 yards running full speed before they were able to get someone on him. And if you're not going to have a quarterback spy on them, it's fine. But the first guy has to make that tackle. You cannot get juked out of your shoes by a quarterback if you're not going to have someone there to make the tackle immediately. If not, you have to bring them down. If you don't, it then gives an extra dynamic to where now you're bringing people up, and now the pass game is open. So if Aaron Glenn could figure out a way to stop mobile quarterbacks and fully stop them, I mean, they got the win, which is great, but figure out a way to neutralize their legs without having to use a quarterback spy, that would be great. Because if not, it's going to create more tension on the defensive line, more tension on the defensive backs, and you're going to see way more pass interference and calls and things of that nature, because the defensive backs are using their hands to try to fight receivers, looking, am I going to have to go make a tackle? Am I going to have to go look to see where the ball's coming? So they're trying to keep a hand on someone to make sure they don't get too far away from them. So it causes stress throughout. But otherwise, they played a really great game. Kirby Joseph is rounding himself into being like not just like a pretty good safety, but like one of the best safeties in this league. And I know hearing that, given all the chatter that's coming from him in the past year and a half, is kind of insane. But you look at the numbers, and since he's come into the league, only like 2 other safeties have more interceptions than him. which is something I read and was like, huh? But yeah, he's become a ball hawk. He's become a hitter. He's become someone you avoid throwing to because he's going to get a hand on the ball and do something. And he had another interception against the Cardinals. They were targeting Marvin Harrison Jr., and he went up there and pulled that thing down and laid there in the end zone like he was doing a snow angel. This team is coming together, and I know fantasy football nerds are going to be like, oh, but Goff only had X amount of whatever and such, and who cares? They're winning. The Lions are winning, and that's all that matters.
So how are you feeling going into Monday Night Football and the Seahawks next week? Because there's going to be the national stage, the national wins on Detroit.
Revenge game for sure. They lost last season to them, heartbreaking fashion. They need to neutralize the run. Kenneth Walker III, who everyone in this state knows from his time at Michigan State, has rounded himself into being a pretty decent starting running back in the league. So you got to make sure you keep him under 85, 90 yards. Geno Smith is doing well as the starting quarterback for the Seahawks. Make him move on the run. He's not that mobile anymore. He can get out of the pocket, but I know that his accuracy definitely drops when you make him throw on the run. And just when you get on there, you have to score. You have to put the ball in the end zone. You cannot settle for field goals. Well, we do have a kicker that can make them in Jake Bates. He did miss an extra point, but okay. When you have a chance to score, you need to score. The ball needs to be in the end zone. We need to see someone doing a pretty creative dance after they put the ball past that line. You can't settle for field goals here, and you can't do anything crazy. I know we like the hook and ladder. I know we like the fake punt to Vaki for the throw. You can only do that stuff when you have the pressure on. So keep the pressure on these teams and make them make mistakes. As long as they do that, they'll be fine. It's just, as you see sometimes, the pressure wanes, and Ben Johnson, he's had 3 really good first halves of this NFL season, and then 3 really poor second halves. I don't know what his play calling is. I don't know why they switch up so dramatically to where it's oh yeah, we need extra yards, let's throw the ball. It's just run out the clock, run the ball, just do that. At times, I think it's what keeps this team from being truly great. I know everyone in the entire country is the Lions Super Bowl contenders. The thing that keeps him from that is sometimes I think he gets a little bit too cute. He is one of the best offensive coordinators in the league currently. But I think his play calling gets a little bit too cute to the point to where the Lions will suffer, and it puts more stress on this defense, and it's why some people want to call it Aaron Glenn at times, because the defense can't hold up to what they need to hold up to. They're tired. If the offense takes care of their business, the defense can take care of theirs, and they can go about their business the right way. But if the defense plays poorly, the offense has to then play harder. If the offense plays poorly, then the defense has to work harder. So it's about keeping that balance in the middle of not making stupid plays on offense and or defense. The penalties, roughing the passer, pass interference, they're backbreaking. There are reasons for them, but they're still backbreaking, and it makes your offense have to work harder because you're typically giving up yards and points. So don't do that going into the game against the Seahawks, because they will definitely take those yards up, and they will definitely put the ball in the end zone.
Before we go a few minutes, let's talk about Michigan's upset victory against USC. Look, everyone's kind of looking at Michigan going, anything that they do is cherry on the top at this point after the championship and the coach changes and everything else. But Sharon Moore, Alex Orji, with his first start for Michigan, they pulled a rabbit out of the hat with USC, and now Michigan is sitting at number 12 in the AP poll and still very much in the shot for the playoffs.
Good on Alex Orji for his first start, but it was brutal. It was a brutal start. 7 of 12 passing for 32 yards.
Yeah, that wasn't great.
If it wasn't for Khalil Mullings and Donovan Edwards, this might have been a repeat of the Texas game from 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it's great to get this win. It's so weird to see USC and be Big Ten USC, because that's going to take me at least a year or two to get used to. Seeing Oregon and UCLA and USC under the Big Ten banner is just wild. But they definitely stuck it out. USC has some pretty big recruits. Michigan still has their players they've had from before. If they just keep riding the wave like this, they have a chance to, like you said, make it to the playoffs. Especially with the playoffs expanding a little bit, they have a bit more room. If they just win out, which would be great for everyone, but especially in a pretty packed Big Ten in terms of ranked teams, I think they have a pretty good chance. I think State has a pretty good chance too, even though after losing to 25th ranked Boston College, they're playing ugly as well, but they're winning games. So as long as both teams keep the pressure on, kind of like with the Lions, keep forcing teams to make mistakes as opposed to being the ones who make the mistakes, you have a much better chance of winning.
Well, I would love to hear what people think. DailyDetroit@gmail.com. Let's talk about the Tigers, the Lions, or Michigan, or anything else you want us to cover or ask us about. We love to answer questions, don't we, Fletcher Sharpe?
I actually do. I know he said it like that, but I actually love when people ask questions. I'm like, yeah, man, someone actually wants me to get some in-depth. I'll sit there, put my little thinking cap on, and send a little reply. We'll really get some crazy answers back.
Honestly, it would be a great way to do some of the sports coverage is to talk about people's questions as opposed to only the recaps. It would be really great. So if you've got them, dailydetroit@gmail.com. Would love to hear from people about their Detroit sports questions, whether they're on the wall or off the wall. Fletcher Sharpe, so good to talk to you, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Of course. With that, I'm J.R. Stays, and thank you so much for listening to your Daily Detroit. A reminder that we are supported by our members on Patreon. A couple of you joined up over the weekend. Thank you so very much, James and Chris. You are the best. We have a Discord. You can join a Discord chat to be in touch with us whenever you want. You can follow us on social media if you like. We're on Instagram, Threads, places to check us out. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll talk tomorrow. Take care, everybody.